Hello and welcome to the second episode of recording Arise.Works. And today we have a guest, a friend of mine. He goes by nickname Midphase on the SideFX forum, and his name is Case. He's a filmmaker, 3D generalist, and creator of a YouTube channel, Writes Brain Tutorials. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess today's topic will be slightly less technical than the first one, and hopefully we will talk about maybe how did you start the whole CGI thing? How do you approach CGI? Maybe the challenges of getting into Houdini out of an application like Cinema 4D, for example, or maybe even Blender, or what have you, like Maya or so. And maybe some, I don't know, shortcuts or suggestions how to possibly have less pain getting started with Houdini than the usual average guy has. So yeah, I think that's something to talk about throughout this
For
hour.
sure. Let's go for it.
Okay, so first things first, just tell me how did you arrive to the point that you need to use Houdini in your workflow, and maybe even what did you start to do the 3D and CGI in the first place? Because that's really interesting how people arrive at the position they are in their lives.
Sure. Well, let me go back a few years. Hopefully, it won't be like too long and boring. But basically, I started making films, like short films, about 10 years ago. And the first time that I ever encountered the need to do like some sort of visual effect sort of thing was on my very first short, and it was like a really nowadays it's a really simple kind of thing for me to do, but at the time it was like whoa, where I literally needed a guy to like run in the middle of the road and a car to almost hit him, right?
Uh-huh.
And the way we shot it is we put the camera on a tripod and we shot the actor running across the street when there were no cars, and then we got him off the road, and then we had a car drive through the shots so that basically we shot it as two separate takes. And then when I was editing in post, I was like, okay, I got to figure out a way to combine those two shots, and that's my first kind of into this world of visual effects. And I used the After Effects, and as I said, it was a relatively simple shot, right? You just kind of take like one half of the frame, and you take the guy running in the other half, and you just kind of do a quick composite, just do a quick mask, and off you go. But it just blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. This is I can't believe that something that kind of felt like was in the realm of someone like Industrial Light and Magic. All of a sudden I was like, oh, I could do that. This is awesome. What else, and that led me to a second short film called In Lucidity. And In Lucidity was a lot more visually ambitious, and it deals with like the world of nightmares and monsters, and basically this main character that's kind of having this recurring nightmare. And so we go into his mind, and every time that he's inside this dream world, there's this kind of really creepy monster that chases him and kind of wants to kill him.
Huh.
And what ended up happening is, like, I had an actor in full costume and makeup play the monster, and it looked cool. Except when I got into post and I started editing, I was like, what would be even cooler if he had tentacles come out of him. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I really didn't. And at first, being like a user of After Effects, I tried to do it with this plugin called Particular.
Mm.
And basically I was gonna do like all these kind of particle streams that come out of him, and basically they look like tentacles. And I ran several tests, and I just didn't really like it. I didn't like visually. It just didn't look right. It just looked kind of cheesy to me.
Oh, I see.
And And so I started contacting several friends of mine that were doing CG work, and asking them for help. And of course, I couldn't get anybody to help me. And I didn't really have like a huge budget to go out and hire a CG studio to work on this. And at some point, I just kind of rolled up my sleeves, and I'm like, okay, if I am to learn this, what is the best program for me to learn? And after reading like a lot of discussions online, everybody seemed to have the consensus that Cinema 4D was the way to go. It's like it's the more kind of artist friendly, the most kind of intuitive CG app out there. And so I got like Cinema 4D, and I started using it. And at first, it was really painful just to kind of wrap my head around this world of of kind of CG elements. And it took me about a year, like a full year of just kind of research and doing, watching tutorials and reading as much as I could, until I could kind of get a grasp on how to create these tentacles. And once I did, I was once again hooked. I was like, okay, this is really amazing. I can create this like really creepy looking tentacles, and I can move them the way I want them, and I can kind of have them interact with the actors in a way that's um, it completely is it's very natural and very it feels like they're really there.
Yeah, so they kind of make an impact with an actor, not just floating around, right?
Yeah, I mean, like my biggest regret, and this is just kind of like part of the learning process, is that when I actually shot the film, um, I didn't intend to have these tentacles, right? Like that's something that's just kind of that's an idea that I had afterwards. So in retrospect, I wish I could have told the actors, hey, look, there's gonna be like crazy looking tentacles that are gonna, trying to like stab you, and you know, and that would have probably like, been a little bit better, but it still worked out. I mean, it worked out remarkably well. I was very surprised, and once again, I was hooked, and ever since then, I've been using Cinema 4D pretty regularly on a bunch of different projects, and some stuff I've done, for some friends, some stuff I've done commercially, and then of course like my own projects.
Sure.
And I've been very happy with the with the artistic kind of interaction that Cinema 4D offers. However, I started getting a little bit frustrated with Cinema 4D when I started getting into more of this kind of effects type of things, like explosions,
Particles,
water
dynamics,
elements.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And of course, like the thing about Cinema 4D is that like there's all these third-party plugins that you can buy. So you can buy RealFlow, you can buy Turbulence FD, you can buy X Particles, but it just kind of adds, it adds to your cost, and it adds, to basically like it just kind of makes the whole like kind of thing that much more complicated. Where all of a sudden you have to like kind of learn, okay, I got to learn X particles now, and and X particles kind of interacts within like the Cinema 4D world in a certain way. Um, and same thing with like Turbulence FT, and same thing with RealFlow. And it just didn't seem like an elegant solution to me, and I was like, there's got to be something better out there to tackle all this. And of course, everybody was pointing me to Houdini.
Right.
And I didn't really know much about Houdini, except that I would read it in articles on magazines, as that's the application that all the like kind of big movies are using. And I was intrigued. So the first time that I downloaded the Houdini Apprentice, which is fantastic, by the way. I mean, it's great that you can kind of basically download like a full functioning version of this incredibly powerful application. And really like the only the only like kind of downside is you have like a watermark when you render, but other than that, like you have the full capability of the program.
Well, you cannot export stuff as well. Just
You can export stuff as well, and there's some kind of workarounds
really,
to.
I think the only export works is OBJ, and
Yes,
VDBs, FBX, they don't work. So
correct.
just exporting
But
OBJs, even for standalone rendering like in Octane or maybe in UE4, and well, indie version is just $260, so it's totally worth it. Now, out of
totally.
curiosity, how
Yes.
many how many years have you been using Cinema before thinking of switching to Houdini?
So Cinema 4D I've been using for about I guess about like 6 years. I started out, I think it was like R13 maybe.
Mm.
Now it's R20 just came out. Um, so yeah, it's been about like 6 years, and I was very comfortable in it. I mean, I kind of knew the ins and outs, and um, one of the things that was a little bit more frustrating about Cinema 4D was the render engine, the physical engine, which is like the built-in render engine in Cinema 4D is okay. You can get like good results in it, but it's kind of slow.
Yeah, it makes
Um,
pictures and that's about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's I kind of like I watched all these courses on how to optimize the rendering engine so you can kind of get it fast and you can kind of put like the focus where it needs to be, and you're not kind of wasting rendering cycles on stuff that you don't really need, and that helps. Um, but a couple of years ago is also when I started looking into like Octane
Mm.
as a rendering engine, and Octane is really cool. And I was pretty much hooked up to Octane, and then I dabbled shortly with Arnold, and I liked Arnold a lot because it felt very intuitive. Um, and then ultimately ended up settling for Redshift because I thought it kind of offered the best of both worlds. It had like this kind of very powerful and intuitive workflow like Arnold did, and it's also fast. It's an incredibly powerful and fast rendering engine. So
Yeah. So I think was Houdini 16.0 your first kind of introduction to Houdini? I think I started seeing your posts just when I actually joined the forums on SideFX as well. It was around
right.
a year ago ish. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I actually had like two introductions with Houdini. The first time I downloaded this apprentice version, and it was 16, and I opened it, and I think I used it for a whole lot of 10 minutes before shutting it down and saying, "Forget this.
Yeah, you
I'm
have a lot
not."
of perseverance, I gotta say, for the first run of
Yeah,
Houdini.
yeah, like I just like I mean I opened it. Even something as simple as okay, I want to create a cube, right? Or
Right.
as they call it in Houdini, a box, and you click on the box icon, and you don't have a box in your scene. Like it doesn't pop up. All of a sudden, you have this kind of red kind of outline of a box, and it's following your mouse, and you're like, okay, now what? And then you click somewhere, and all of a sudden, like it does create a box in your scene, except it's not really at the origin point. And then you're like, how do I resize this? Anyway, it was like a very, very frustrating kind of. It felt very alien to me when I first opened it,
I
and
see.
I basically shut it down, and I didn't touch it at all for another good like probably like 3 or 4 months after that. And then it was this friend of mine came to visit, and he's an ex Disney animator, and he teaches now like at this school in Seattle called DigiPen.
Hmm.
And he came down, and he was very enthusiastic about Houdini, and he was saying that that's all that they're talking about at the school, and how it would be worth it. It would be worth it to learn it. And so after he left, I gave it another shot, and this time it was 16.5. So this was it was really like last December
Oh, I
that I
see.
kind of got back into it, and this time I decided, I was like, I'm going to really give this an honest effort to try to learn the software, and my initial idea was I'm going to learn as much as I can learn until I can use it within Cinema 4D. So like my idea was like, I know that Cinema 4D has a built-in Houdini engine, so you can kind of import those Houdini HDA things, and that was my idea. I was like, I'll keep doing everything in Cinema 4D, but
Mhm.
whenever I need to do some explosions or some other kind of very effects driven type of things, I'll go into
Basically,
Houdini, I'll do that, and then I'll bring it
uh,
back into Cinema 4D, and I'll keep right on working. So that was my plan.
yeah, sort of you try to replace the turbulence, the X particles, the real flow just with Houdini kind of thing, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. What I wasn't what I wasn't thinking is that I would like Houdini so much that basically within like 2 or 3 months, I've pretty much abandoned Cinema 4D, and I'm like, I'm not going back to Cinema 4D. It just feels really, not dumb, but it just kind of feels. It actually starts feeling more convoluted. That's the thing that surprised me, because at first it's just the opposite, right?
Yeah.
You open Houdini and everything feels very convoluted and very like alien, as I said, and the more you use Houdini, the more everything else starts feeling this way, you know. And all of a sudden, you start looking at Cinema 4D, and it's like, why, why does Cinema 4D do it that way? There's, Houdini is better, and
Yeah.
um, so that was my impression, and I've been using Houdini ever since, and kind of learning more and more about it, and I just love it. I mean, not a day goes by that I don't pick up some new trick. So it's been really exciting for me.
Well, what can I say? Like, welcome to the world of initial pain and then the joy, I guess. I don't know. Sounds a bit too kinky, but it is what it is, I guess. Speaking of cinema, yeah, I remember when people were trying to tell me. I mean, me personally, I got into the whole business of learning the Houdini, right? Because Houdini actually, surprisingly, is my first DCC application.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow.
I'm not sure if it's bad or good. It's just I did not have all that much experience from Cinema, Maya, 3ds Max, you name it, right? Because I was seeing like the tutorials and thinking like, that looks interesting. I wish I could do some stuff. And basically, in Maya, Cinema, or what have you, the only stuff I could do is just, like you said, like place a sphere, and it's like, eh, it looks all right. Maybe I can array it into the circle or something, because in Cinema it's kind of a couple of clicks.
Right.
That was pretty much it. So basically, combines time learning experience of all the other DTC apps. I think it's under an hour or so, right? And they're like, I have tried them all. And basically, when people told me, if you want to explode planets or create tornadoes or just render anything you want and create anything you want, you gotta go and do the Houdini. But actually, when I went to Reddit and I asked people in the Houdini Reddit, not sure if you were
Hmm.
there or not, but I'm like, hello guys, I want to do this and that. I want to do like short animation, motion graphics, this and that, maybe visualization of product design, and such and such. So is Houdini any good? And everyone was like, oh, you don't want to do Houdini,
Right.
you're better off with Maya or Cinema or whatever else, Blender, you name it.
Yeah.
But don't
Mhm.
touch Houdini. Houdini is for super complicated, like people to create rocket science, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
is there? And after I actually listened to a couple of different podcasts with people, like for me personally, I went into the whole 3D thing. I mean, I wanted to get in the whole 3D thing for 10 years, 15 years, you name it, right? It's just the time is never right. I'm like, maybe tomorrow, and then maybe tomorrow was like 10 years, maybe tomorrow. But
Right.
after I watched finally watched the Ghost in the Shell movie, which came out March 2017, I guess, if that's correct,
Hmm.
somewhere between those lines. Anyway, so I was watching this movie, You can say all you want about this movie, but it looked, sounded, and everything else designed. It was amazing. I fell in
Yes.
love with it. I was like, well, I want to do this, okay? And I wasn't sure what this actually meant, right? The
Hmm.
great scheme of things was like, I want to create the world that will be living, breathing. Everything will be exploding. Badass women will kick ass, and all the good stuff.
Right.
And I was thinking, which application does all that? And yeah, you said, I started to. Everyone was saying you got to do the cinema. It's kind of the staple of the motion graphics and VFX. It's cool. It's super easy and whatnot. But then whenever people were talking about fluid simulations, anything with dynamics, anything with particles, everybody, well, that's Houdini. I'm like, well, I'm not sure what's the point actually to invest time in Maya or Cinema if
Right.
people, when they say like, if you want to go really deep, right, it will
Hmm.
be a pain in the butt as well to do really deep stuff using, for example, Cinema 4D. So basically, when I was trying to see what's what, uh, Simon Hallmetal. I'm pretty sure you know who that is, but for anyone who is listening or watching this and not sure who Simon Hallmetal is, he's the guy who was the god of Cinema 4D. And then when he ran out of buttons to press in Cinema 4D, he went pressing buttons in Houdini. And basically, he's, I want to say, trendsetter of VFX for advertisement stuff.
Right.
Possibly, yeah. Basically, when he does things, everyone rushes to copy him because it looks amazing. And there
Right.
are like tutorials from people how to do stuff like Simon Whole Metal does. So basically, yeah, he's the trendsetter. And when he explains stuff like if you want to have particles going around and then you want to rotate one object, to do that in Cinema 4D, you have to go through amazing pains to open nodal network. Then you have to fetch the particle number. Basically, it was super convoluted, which is like the insides of Houdini, so to speak. But in Houdini, it's in your face, whereas in Cinema, you have to go. First, you have to click like 20 buttons or so just to get to the interface, and then you have to write some code and blah blah blah. And then he said, if you do this in Houdini, it will take you like 2 clicks. Sure, the initial setup might look like it's convoluted. I think
Right.
it is notorious for being hard just because it throws nodes at you, which actually isn't bad. It's actually like for me, I cannot see myself like working with nodes anymore. Why would anyone do the layering things or I don't know modifier stack if there is an option to do this with nodes? Anyway, I'm getting a bit sidetracked here. So after understanding like if you want to do hard stuff, even if it's Maya or 3ds Max or even Cinema, which is supposed to be the super easiest thing,
Right.
it will be still super hard to do. And I was thinking like if I'm gonna do sometime down the road, if I am to go into the VFX, hopefully I will still have a lot of pain in the lower part of the body. And what is the point of investing time in something that cannot do it if I will have to get back to Houdini? And
Correct.
all the naysayers were saying like, "Don't do this! Like you will jump out of the window," and all the funny business. And I was like, you know what? Also, of course, Houdini was just $200 for the indie license, and
Right.
I don't know why I did it. I just went out and bought myself an indie license. Like, sort of, I was feeling if I were to start with Apprentice, there will be not that much of a pressure on myself, right? I didn't even invest money apart from the in tutorials and stuff. But
Right.
I was like, I'll buy Houdini, do amazing renders because as you know, Apprentice is just HD, and back in the day, the Indie was full HD at that point. So, yeah, and like I said, Houdini was my first DCC, like digital creation something application, and digital content creation. Yeah, I corrected myself. Anyway,
Yeah, I know, right? That's the new cool word, the
yeah,
DCC.
the DCC. What's your DCC? Anyway, right. So yeah, I did not go through the pain of relearning things. So Houdini being my first introduction to the world of 3D and VFX, sure, it kind of wrecked my brain anyway, but I think it was kind of worth it, if you want to say it, because I don't have to adjust to Houdini anymore. And like you said, I then went back to cinema. Like
Right.
distributing copies onto the points was, where is this? Why do I have to make some what is it? Weight painting, paint some weights of point distribution, and they lagged like hell. I don't even know, and I'm pretty much positive I was doing it right because the newest version of Cinema 4D, like the release 20, it's supposed to fix that exact problem, like
Right.
the instances of the points, because previously it was just, I don't want to say anything bad, but it was not great. And
Right.
now, when I went into the Blender just to have something where I have to do the poly modeling, it's just such a pain to create something procedural in Blender. It it just it's not clicking with me. Sure, like moving polygons and such is great there, but if you want to create an asteroid, it's just don't, you know, just open up Houdini. Which I was thinking I was going somewhere with this, but you gotta help me out. I'm getting so sidetracked. I cannot keep up with my
Well,
thoughts.
I think you're touching on the right point though, and I think what's really important for for artists like us is we have something in our head, and how quickly can we realize that? How quickly can we get it out of our head into whatever application we're using, and ideally with that application not constantly fighting us back. And that's the biggest kind of struggle I think for creatives everywhere is you have a limited amount of time to get that idea that's so vivid and fresh in your head onto the screen, and you want to feel like you're, I mean, it's a little zen like, but you want to feel like you're one with whatever application you're using, and you don't want to feel like at every step of the way the application is kind of fighting your ability to realize that. And to me that's that's something that I struggle with just about every piece of software that I use. I mean, that's the truth. Like even something like Cinema 4D. One of the things that I've always found like kind of frustrating about Cinema 4D is you have all these MoGraph elements and effectors, and it- it's what I would call like an instant gratification type of software,
Mhm.
and yet at the same time, as you start really kind of digging into it, it does kind of fight you back. It does kind of create these issues that then sidetrack your creative um, focus, because all of a sudden you have to kind of stop whatever it is that you're doing creatively to kind of go and solve some issue. Like I mean, for me, like one of the things about um, Cinema 4D that always just kind of that I found frustrating is you have all these as I said, like you have like the MoGraph elements, the factors, and I could never quite get used to whether an element, one of those effectors had to be put inside my object, or if my object had to be parented to to whatever it is that I was
Oh
using.
yeah, I totally understand. Like, why doesn't like my line become a tube? Which is it? Is
Right.
it line inside the tubify or tubify? It's just like
Yeah, correct. Like if you have, for instance, one of the things that um, most people use in Cinema 4D is the sweep. The sweep. What is it called? Modifier,
yeah.
or and basically what you do is like you create like a spline to let's say if you want to make a tube, you just create like a spline that's got like whatever your the bends or whatever it is that you want, and then what you do is you create typically a circle, and that gives it like the circumference, so that's so your tube is like kind of this circular kind of thing, and you put them all inside, as I said, the sweep uh, objects, I guess, and out comes a tube, except the order in which you put, whether it's the circle or whether it's the spline, makes all the difference in the world, right? Because in one case, if I forget, like if the spline is first and the circle is second, then you get like this jumbled mess. But then if the circle is first and the spline is second, then you get the tube that you're looking for.
Amazingly
Um,
enough, like from my personal experience, I never get it right from the first go. Like I'm
right, exactly.
constantly saying, "Okay, I remember it right. I do this, and it will be great." And it's like nothing works. I'm like, it's the other way around.
But that's the problem. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Is you are focused on your creative energy because you have this image in your head and you're trying to get it on the screen as quickly as possible before you forget it, and the application is fighting you, and all of a sudden you are sidetracked from being able to do your artistic vision, because now you have to like sit there and think, oh, which one do I have to put first? And sure enough, like the one that you put first is the wrong one. So then, okay, I gotta swap their places. It's a distraction. It becomes like a distracting element that does affect the final product.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally you're being sidetracked from having to deal with all these kind of weird, silly things that for some reason the application is kind of putting in front of you, all these obstacles. Another thing that like would drive me nuts is I use a lot of this kind of kit bash elements, and I'll bring a model into Cinema 4D and I want to customize it, and so maybe you want to delete some portion of this object that you're bringing in, and I think they fixed this finally in R20, which it's not even out yet. I think it's coming out this month. But I think this is one of the things that they fixed, and it's like you go and you delete, a polygon, or like you select a group of polygons, hit delete, they're gone, but they're really not gone. And now all of a sudden, if you switch to like point modes, all of a sudden all the points, literally like all the connecting points of the polygons that used to be there, they're still there. And that would drive me insane, because it's because like all of a sudden, like my object is it's still not behaving the way I want it to, and it's because there's this kind of remnant point, and the software is just not really, I guess, smart enough to figure out that if you want to delete this group of polygons, you also want to delete the connecting points. And it's just little things like that that are constantly sidetracking you. And I think what I liked about Houdini almost immediately is that, just like you said, it kind of puts everything in front of you. It kind of forces you to deal with it. And at first it might seem counterintuitive, right?
Right.
At first
It's too hard. Why should I learn attribute VAP instead of doing amazing spheres in terrains, right?
Correct. But instead, what actually ends up happening, the more you use it, is that it actually, in my opinion, makes your artistic flow more focused, because you're not being surprised by by results that are not what you want. Every step of the way you're having to deal with, how do I get from point A to point B? But you're never surprised, and you're never having to like kind of go and dig around and see how come my tube doesn't look like a tube and instead looks like a jumbled mess.
Right.
So I find Houdini to actually be more intuitive from that point of view, if you can get past the initial kind of scary, like elements of it. So,
Right. So, which brings me to my next, I would say, topic in the discussion.
Sure.
Learning Houdini, and it's being notorious for being hard. Now, I just want to say this: me going like I made a leap of faith, right? It's possibly
Hmm.
not even the greatest way around doing this because I didn't know what normal is. I didn't know what like I knew what vertex is, but it didn't help a lot. Now, my personal opinion on learning Houdini is not that it's super hard. It's not hard. It's super tedious. That's okay. But the
Hmm.
biggest problem of learning Houdini is that no one explains you the basics. Because when you ask a question, I don't remember. Possibly there was I talked about this with you in messages and
Hmm.
forum. Like you maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Possibly you were saying like you were trying to find a bevel shader, right?
Right.
And people were suggesting that, well, why don't you write your own bevel shader? How hard can it
Right.
be? Like, what are you talking about? Especially like there are some people on the forum which are kind of trying to help you. And there are some people, instead of even trying to help you, they just almost saying in your face, like, get on my level. This is,
Correct.
that is so strange. I'm like, can you please help me? No, I suffered through it as well. So you suffer now as well. So you get, oh, what?
Well,
Yeah.
it's I've been putting a lot of thought into it, and that's probably like the element that I don't like about the Houdini community. Although I will say that it's changing very very quickly. Uh, so that's for the better. But I mean, I have a couple of theories about that, and I'm sure I'm going to ruffle some feathers by even saying it. But I think it's important to kind of discuss it. I think that you know one of the issues is that especially in the past, Houdini has been like a very, very difficult program to get into because I think that it's really only been since I think version 15 that SideFX has really tried to add, like some more user-friendly kind of tools to Houdini and try to kind of bring into the fold, more creative users that are they're interested in the potential and don't necessarily have like a engineering or math degree.
Yeah, my personal take it would be version 16 actually when they started to at least work on the UI and all the
Right.
other stuff. I think it would be 16 when we switched to the principled shader model as well. Everything like
Right.
sort of like the point VOP or which is point SOP. I'm sorry. Everything they just changed everything, and again, I'm sorry for interrupting, but that again increased the difficulty in getting into Houdini because virtually everything, became obsolete. So please go on with your theory. I like theories.
Well, I mean, I try to put myself into the shoes of somebody that's been with Houdini for the past like 20 years or so, and basically has had to like kind of go at it the hard way. And and I think that there's an element of pride because you've kind of like achieved this kind of black belt sort of Jedi master sort of level, and you're kind of turned off by knowing that there's like an easier way all of a sudden, or maybe it can be almost like insulting that somebody wants to achieve quicker and better results, but they don't necessarily want to put in all the years and years of kind of effort to get there. And so I see a lot of resistance to that. Yeah, like I mean, there's a lot of like people on the forums who almost kind of sound indignant when you're asking them, is there an easier way to do this? Is there a better way of doing this? Um, and the other thing I think has to do with, to be very practical about this, it has to do with job security. And this is true. I mean, if you are working in a visual effects studio and you're surrounded by all these kind of creative types that are probably using Maya to do like their modeling, they're using like Katana for for all the other aspects of it, and Nuke. you know, you take a certain pride at being that guy that's kind of like the office all the way in the back at the end of the hall. That's kind of like a guru at this type of stuff, right? I mean, people come to you and say, okay, we need to figure out how to get this Star Destroyer to break into a million pieces, but we also have like, we need to have like zero gravity, and we need to float it into space, but we also have to have control over where the pieces end up, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And if you're like that one guy in that whole organization who knows how to do that because you're very apt at Vex, and you know how to code all this behavior, you have job security. That's the truth. It's like nobody else can do it because it's so complicated. So as long as nobody else can do it, they have to come to you, and they have to pay you, a good amount of money, because nobody else knows how to do it.
Well, I see your point, but I'm not sure. Like in today day and age, like let's say graphics designer, right? Let's not say VFX, Godzilla, Tokyo Destruction. Graphics designer. Basically, everyone and their mother can install Photoshop using $10 per month,
Correct.
and there are so many things and so much training with the Photoshop thing. It's almost amazing why isn't everyone an actual graphic designer, well paid one. So, which what I'm trying to say is, if this, if you really are thinking about your job security, there is a
Right.
possibility. I'm not saying like it's a fact. There is a possibility. What you should do is create new, more effective workflows. Because if you're looking at the guys who are saying, I can do this and this and this, and use some add-ons or whichever, right? Or I will not use attribute. Point VOP. I will do everything with AVOP. And you're thinking,
Right.
well, this is not how it's done. What you see their results, and they're the same, or at least 99% the same as you do. Maybe it's just a call to make you thinking like, well, there is a possibility I might, get my game up to speed. Because like if there was this job insecurity thing, what I'm trying to say is like, it's not really hard to learn how to code, right? But there is only one Twitter and YouTube, okay?
Right.
It's just how effective, fast, and responsive and a team player you are, more than just some guy knows how to make explosions in Houdini. I see your
Correct.
point, but if you are thinking that, I would say maybe there is something you could change about your perception of what's what with the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that that's the main reason. I think that might be a factor into, some of these people's kind of hesitation to kind of offer some quick solutions, and they might be a little more protective of their knowledge, and they might, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, so making it more difficult than it needs to be. And and to me, that's part of the problem with the perception of Houdini. More than anything, is that the perception is that it's a very, very difficult package to learn. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. Actually, I think that it's, in many ways, is I find it to be even more intuitive than something like Cinema 4D. But the perception out there, whenever I mention Houdini to, any of my friends, they basically kind of balk at it. They're like, oh wow, oh my god, that's crazy, you're using Houdini, that's insane.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that I think SideFX is trying to change this, but fundamentally it has to come from within the user base, to where people like us have to go out there and say, hey, it's not that difficult. I mean, once you kind of wrap your head around, some of the procedural elements, once you wrap your head around the node-based, way of doing things, it actually makes a lot of sense, and it actually becomes easier to some degree to accomplish what you need to accomplish in Houdini than to try to do it in some of these other packages.
that is true. This is why I discussed it with you personally, and I have those like we are currently are at this point discussing the Houdini. So what I'm trying to say is to change the perception of Houdini. Uh, it's not it's not enough just to have the marketing department to pump out some videos which will say like, look, this is easy, that is easy. All it takes is just a couple of weeks of learning hard the
Correct.
Houdini. So what I was saying about the whole thing of community, like get on my level and job security and this and that, it's like they almost don't want you to learn it. And me personally coming into Houdini, I was like, wait a second, what is happening here, right? Why is everyone so stressed out about me learning Houdini, or maybe trying to find different ways, like even rendering stuff? There is zero tutorials on how to render with the current generation of mantra shading. Basically, people even I went on SideFX forum 3 days ago, 4 days ago. There were guys like, "Hey, is there anything that I could learn how to use mantra, please? Because everything is outdated and it's using the shop context instead of math context." And I was like,
Right.
guys, yeah, buckle up. I'm working on that. Just give me a week or so, and it will be up. So possibly like the thing you told, you have to be this one guy who destroys who crashes the star destroyers, right, and explodes planets. So if you have, I imagine they earn a lot because being the main TD in ILM or Lucasfilm, which is, I think it's ILM as well, anyway. So
Mhm.
you don't have the time to go to forums and explain stuff, or
Correct.
you don't have the you don't care about if someone understands how to render the pyro simulations, because you have to optimize your pyro simulations to the next installment of King Kong movie or something. It's just you don't give a crap, honest to God. So and yeah, the people that are more curious than technical, like we are, um, I usually compare it with, God forbid, with Blender society, because Blender people, well, they are everywhere, right? Because it's
Right.
free, it's easy to get into. You start modeling, and a couple of Torai creates you, which is a donut setup. Yeah, the most
Mhm.
famous thing is the donut tutorial, I guess. Anyway, and Cinema 4D, take Nick Vegas and his team under the Grayscale Gorilla, or
Yes.
iDesign with Ari and other guys. I'm not sure if there are other guys. I have only seen him. Anyway, so there are these communities, and the most important and amazing thing, well, sure, having a community, there is a leverage, right? You can go to Adobe presentation, or you can go to Maxon booth and say, yo, this is Cinema 20, let me show you, because I kind of show it on the YouTube channel, so I'm known for that. That's kind of, uh, I would say it's a bit of fame, right? It's cool. If you
Mhm.
see Nick Vegas showing you how to do, I don't know, a floating banana looking like a mirror, whatever, cool. He's an
Right.
entertaining guy.
Right.
Um, but within Houdini, he or she is so deep into his job. He or she doesn't have time to read any forum posts, any YouTube, nothing. They have to destroy Manhattan once again by the summer. There is no
Right.
way
Right.
they're gonna teach you it. That changed with Steven Nipping, which kind of
Correct. Yeah. I was gonna
destroyed.
say Stephen
Yeah, yeah,
Nipping
yeah,
is an actual ILM guy that's out there teaching.
yeah. So
Right.
basically, like, honest to God, there are kind of three people who genuinely teach Houdini, right? That would be Rohan Dalvi,
Right.
um,
Correct.
that would be Steven Nipping,
Hmm.
um, and I would say everyone else combined.
Well, I would add the Entagma guys on there.
There
And
are,
actually,
yeah,
I
I
think
could
like
say so.
Manuel Merkel, which is the one half of the Entagma um, team. I think he comes from Cinema 4D as well.
Yeah,
So it's although Entagma tends to like they're very entertaining and they're very educational, but they do tend to put a lot of emphasis on coding and Vex,
true.
and that can turn off some people for sure.
Yeah, so what I was trying to say on the forums, and you reiterated, and possibly everyone else kind of gets it, but there are many naysayers, is that if you want to change the thing, right? First of all, no better time to start than now, and there is no better way to do it just to do it yourself.
Correct.
Somehow there is a friction with that on the in the community. Also, the community is kind of strange, really, because there are like 68,000 different websites, right?
Right.
And you have to be registered on 25 million forums,
Right.
and everyone's like, "Oh, didn't you read that on Oddforce or SideFX forum or some esoteric website that happens to be known by 12 people?"
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you're like, "No, oh, you got to register there." And like it becomes a job of itself, registering on those thousands of websites, like reading through
That's
the
true.
whole stuff. Especially like nowadays, me personally, I try to keep it minimal, the only to Discord, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
Because reading only the side effects forum is super tedious, especially if you answered someone's question. There is no way of learning if someone replied to you or someone else, or just said like, "You suck, this is wrong." You get some
Right.
kind of, if you even subscribe to the thread, you get a Gmail notification, and like, okay, I think I gotta go read this. So this is really strange. um, I'm not sure what side effects guys think about it, but they are really responsive on the Discord, by the way. So yeah, for now, Discord seems like a thing to go, because reading forums is super tedious. The thread, it just takes too much time. And basically, what you are trying to do is waiting for someone to reply, or you are
Right.
waiting to
Yeah,
see
you're at the
if someone
mercy of.
actually read your reply, which is kind
Correct.
of ridiculous.
Well, you have to rely on the kindness of strangers.
Mm, yeah, hard to come by,
Well,
but hopefully that will change soon.
I think it's interesting that you bring this up, and I think that I mean, in all kind of fairness to side effects, when you first launch Houdini and you open it, there's a splash screen that kind of asks you if you want to watch tutorials. I mean, I think that's fantastic that the company itself is actually kind of encouraging people. I think like SideFX realizes Houdini is a little bit difficult to get into, but here's a bunch of links of tutorials that you can kind of get started with, of of different degree of difficulty, of course.
Mhm.
I think one of the problems, and I'm seeing this not just with Houdini, but I'm actually starting to see that with other software packages, is this trend to not do instruction manuals anymore. Like, so there's no such thing as an instruction manual. I remember I got into like an argument on the Houdini forums, and I'm like, why isn't there a manual here? Like, like the reference guide is not a manual.
Oh, I remember that
It's
one. Yeah.
yeah, like think about it this way. Um, like a reference guide typically will tell you this node does this in a very, very kind of technical way, right? Well, it's a little bit as if you're trying to like learn how to use a hammer. Okay, if you read a reference guide to a hammer and say that it puts this many like pounds of pressure per square inch, if you activate it by with a lever that would be your arm and so on and so forth, well, that's not really going to teach you how to actually use it. That's just going to tell you what it does, but not necessarily in a way that's that you can kind of say, okay, I know how to put this to good use. So one of my biggest frustrations is, I'll go in Houdini has like this kind of help section that's built in, um, and it's really cool to some degree, but 9 times out of 10, I'm very, very frustrated with just kind of reading what a certain node does. I'm like, I understand academically what you guys are trying to tell me that this node does, but I don't understand it practically. I don't
Yeah.
know how to. It's like, okay, you just explained to me what it does, but now you need to explain to me how I actually use it in a real world situation. And I think that's part of the problem. Redshift, by the way, has the same issue as well. they they don't really they talk about the nodes, and you'll kind of like find out, okay, this is what a triplanar node does, but when and how should you use it, that is actually not discussed. um, that's one of the things where I have to say that Cinema 4D does have an incredibly comprehensive manual and help section, and that's one of the things that I really miss about Cinema 4D, is to be able to right click on anything and just kind of get help on it. And not only do you receive like the technical information, okay, this is what it does, but they also have plenty of real world scenarios on how to use it. And to me, that's key when you're trying to like kind of learn software. You need to know, okay, like if I have this node that does this, how do I actually use this,
Yeah, like speaking of rendering, right? This is what closer to me because like when I try to get into the rendering, there is zero
Hmm.
explanation how to do stuff, and I
Right.
tried to figure out what's what, and even I mean I remember from version 16. I'm not sure if that is fixed right now or not. If you just make a texture, like if you want to colorize something with the noise, right? And
Right.
instead of just inserting the texture, you press this little button that looks like then the options button, yeah, and you press use the noise.
Hmm.
Ironically, it creates some kind of noise, but it doesn't append the rest position to the noise, and it doesn't work. And the manual doesn't tell you why it doesn't work, and you sort of have to since it's kind of Vex written shading model, maybe it has to have rest position, which it
Right.
doesn't when you promote it. Like, why is this happening? No one tells me how to fix it. So basically I had to spend so much time to come up with solutions. Like, how does the normals work? Not explained. uh,
Correct.
like, how does the displacement work? Not explained. But there is one one article about how to use it. Like, they just insert the texture from hard drive, the usual like UV premapped, or oh no, they use the noise, but they don't show you how to use it, like how to input the node that converts your information to displacement. Where does the amount of displacements go? Where does the resulting node should go into your principal shader? Like, nothing. This is
Correct.
this
Right.
is so strange. I am not sure on like why is this happening. I don't even know. So basically, like everyone is confused, not because Houdini is hard. It's because nothing is explained. I
Correct.
opened up that topic as well in the forum, and yeah, people started. There is a reference, but reference doesn't teach you anything. Like, let's talk about this. The easiest thing that you should do. I mean, you can do in. By the way, I'm just showcasing some stuff in the viewport right now while I'm recording, just to illustrate what's happening. And
Sure.
you just gotta trust me. I do it anyway. So
Hmm.
you have the geometry, and you have, let's say, a box, right? And then you want to go to the circle, and then when you have the circle, you're thinking like, okay, I'll make it a polygon, so it has like some kind of divisions, so I can copy the box on the circle, right? How hard can it
Correct.
be? So you press the CTP, and oops, yeah, and you copy. But amazingly enough, the boxes aren't rotated looking outwards from the center of the circle, and you're thinking like, it's not working. What should I do? And you should do the polyspline, right?
Hmm.
Oops. No, is it? Oh, this is embarrassing. So basically, you have to compute the tangent normals
Correct.
and
Right.
write them as actual normals.
Right.
So, and even if that is not confusing enough, when I for a fact understood what it does, I went to the manual and tried to read that to understand how they approach explaining this.
Right.
It was amazing. I didn't understand absolutely nothing. It was impossible.
Yeah, I agree. I think the name of the game with Houdini, with learning Houdini, is reverse engineering. Like what you end up doing is basically, um, like opening up someone else's file and trying to kind of figure out, what is doing what and why are they using a certain node. And in all fairness, I mean, and this is something really cool about the Houdini community that I have to give it credit. People are very, very willing to share their Houdini files. I never encountered that in any other community where people will flat out saying, "Here, take a look at this," or you have an issue and you're asking a question, and then somebody else will respond with a solution, but they'll also attach a Houdini file to it that you can kind of dig through and kind of see exactly what they did. That I actually like quite a bit. I think that it's great.
That is true. Yeah, but I don't know. Like, if you don't even understand the simplest thing, if you dive into the AVAP, will it help you? I don't know, you know?
It's a little more visual, but yeah, it's, yeah. I mean, it's challenging for sure, and also, I mean, I really hope that SideFX addresses this, but I think Houdini's overdue for some cleanup. There's a lot of redundancy. There's a lot of nodes that have been deprecated, which you're not supposed to use anymore, but they're still there. And there's a lot of redundancy in the nodes that I think that doesn't need to be there. Like one of the things that I am constantly just baffled by is why is there the wrangle nodes. You basically have four wrangle nodes: a point wrangle, a primitive wrangle, a vertex wrangle, and a volume wrangle. And at least like three of those, the point, primitive, and vertex, the only thing that's different between those three nodes is the fact that a drop-down menu is set up as points, primitives, or vertices. But other than that, it's identical. And to me, it's like, just make it one node. We don't need three or four nodes to do exactly the same thing, and are simply, preset with a drop-down menu that we can do ourselves in a second.
Yeah.
And I think it adds to the clutter. Like um, so there are like elements of that in Houdini that I think could be simplified, and and there's resistance to that. That's the thing that kind of blows my mind about the forums and some of these old school users of Houdini. You'll suggest something like that and they get upset. They'll be like, no, no, like we don't want that. And I'm like, why not? Like, I mean, you know, same thing for like combining nodes. For instance, one of the things that I do all the time is, if I need like, uh, to have a UV texture on my object, I'll create a UV texture. But the problem is that if you want to look at what the hell you're doing, then you need to change your perspective view to the UV viewport, which is not always like what I really want. I still want to have the perspective. I want to be able to kind of rotate my object and kind of like look around and see exactly how the UV map is being wrapped around my object. And and the UV texture node or UV project doesn't do that for you. So now what you need to do is you need to instance a second node, um, which is the UV quick shade,
Hmm.
so that all of a sudden you can kind of get an idea in three-dimensional space of how like the UV map is projected around your object. And to me, it's like, why isn't there like a little checkbox in my UV texture nodes or UV project nodes that says, "Hey, show me what you're doing." Like why is the UV quick shade even necessary as an additional node? I don't think it could be combined, and uh, the same is true for like one of the things that I really ran into that was irritating coming from Cinema 4D, where for instance you can kind of use a cloner object. You have a cube, you can turn it into like a bunch of cubes. You can kind of like randomize them very easily, randomize the size, rotation, position, and so on and so forth. And in Houdini, you have a copy and transform node that you can you can plug, for instance, like a grid. If you want to like kind of copy onto like a bunch of points on a grid, that's fine. But God forbid that you also want to add some randomization to those cubes. All of a sudden, you're asking for trouble. Now you have to pull up the attribute wrangle, and you have to like kind of start coding some Vex properties just so you can kind of start giving these cubes, these clones, some random properties.
Okay.
And that to me feels very, very unintuitive. And before mops came around, that was just a bit of a nightmare for like a lot of people that were just looking for a basic kind of, hey, we just want to like kind of clone a bunch of cubes in a cool shape and have them randomly rotated and random size. And I think mops has been like a big help for that type of functionality.
Mm-hmm.
But like the question that I have is, why does it have to be that way? Why does there have to be like a third party product that allows users to do something as simple as this? Why isn't there like a quicker and easier way to do this? And of course, there used to be like in the older the copy nodes. Let's see,
Copy
the
stamp,
the
I think.
copy stamp, but now if you even like mention it, you'll be like, oh no, you don't want to deprecate it. Like that's not good anymore.
Right.
And you watch a lot of the older tutorials in Houdini, and they'll reference some of these nodes that are deprecated, and all of a sudden you're like, well, okay, so what do I use now? Because I don't really see a replacement.
Okay.
You know,
I see. I
so
see.
that's part of the challenge.
Yeah. So basically, you talked about a lot of stuff. I'm trying to remember everything and go per points. So I'll start with the deprecated nodes, right? The
Yes.
easiest question to answer that, if someone at Pixar were developing a Star Wars story, which took 2 years of R&D, and then SideFX saying, you know what, there were nodes in 15.5 deprecated. No, wait, we actually turned them off. I think people from Pixar will be getting really their ass on fire, because like
Yes.
there are so many HDAs that include those legacy stuff. It will be just it will be killing them to rewrite everything into the new ones. So that's the first one. Second question you had was about having same nodes with one drop down changed, like for each loops for connected points, for each loop for connected primitives, blah blah blah, yada yada. I think this is done for if you just press the tab and you type in the first letters of each. It still is faster to drop the different nodes which are named differently. Like for me, let's say, I don't know how you drop the nodes, but I usually press the tab, then
Right.
write something like CTP, then I press Shift Enter, and I never care what else is happening. I don't want to see what's on the top, what's in the properties tab. So basically, if you're having like these sort of different groups, right? There are a lot of groups
Hmm.
like group copy, combine, yada yada, but they all have different first letters. So basically, if you write something like GCR, you will have like group create. The same thing goes to the for each loop. So basically, for me personally, it's faster to create for each connected piece using the tab menu than to drop
Right.
it and then go and use my mouse and change it per click. So personal preference, I understand why it's done. I think it's To each their own. I think having an option to do it both ways is pretty good. But gotta say, this does really add to the confusion. It really does. When people see so many nodes which do so many stuff, and apparently this is the same, and when people accidentally drop another node, and they're like, oh wow, why isn't it working? Because nothing in Houdini works from the get-go. Let's just be honest, right? You
Right.
have to constantly fix stuff. And if someone just starts with Houdini, they might be thinking like, maybe it doesn't work because I didn't drop the group node, which was like in the version 16 it was just one group. Now it's like 25 groups. I don't
Correct.
know which one to press, right? Finally, about the copying stuff. Like, if you use the copy stamp, this is the most Maya thing you can do in Houdini. And me personally, I didn't go through the whole Cinema Maya 3ds Max to Houdini. I just started with Houdini. And
Right.
for me personally, I think the copying to points, like if you want to have uh, like 15 copies of a thing in a row, you don't do them with copy stamp because you will have to write some vex code within the copy stamp node, which is super well, you will make mistakes and it will not work. Let's just say it like that. But
Correct.
if you just create a line and you make the line to have 15 copies, and then you copy uh, to points your boxes in a row on that line, uh, you can control everything of these copies. Like if you drop attribute VOP, I'm pretty sure you're not a big fan of that. But me personally, I don't see my life without attribute VOP anymore because
Right.
these give so much control. I don't have to write any code there is. I just go into attribute VOP, I drop the noise, propagate the noise into the p scale, and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, I can control p scale. Also, I can
Correct.
control it with using the ramp node, which is amazing. So if I have to create some kind of, I don't know, trees that are rotated slightly differently, they're slightly different, but not really, well, that's the way to go. Using the copy stamp node, it's just counterintuitive to me personally, because the Houdini way is copying onto the points, and amazingly enough, those points, you can drop a mountain node on those points, and you can then just randomize using the mountain node if you don't really feel like dropping the AVOP. So there's just different ways of doing stuff inside of Houdini and everywhere else. I think there was a Gnaman workshop and how to get started with Houdini, and I just say it outright. It was super useless because the teaching person, he was all right, he was okay, but for some reason he was showing how to do stuff that you do in Maya in Houdini using Maya way of thinking, right?
Right.
It was like, why are you doing this? Anyway, so yeah, again,
Yeah.
this is getting back how to approach learning Houdini, and
I agree. I agree. And I think in to add to that, I think part of the challenge with Houdini, which is great, but it's also intimidating to new users, is that there are multiple ways to get the same result, and it's not that one way is better than the other typically, but it's just that it's different. So sometimes you need to accomplish something, and you might be able to arrive at that solution using a certain type of node tree, and then somebody else will say, oh, you can also do it this way, and it just kind of makes you feel like, oh my god, did I do it wrong? Did I mess up somehow? And yeah, like part of it is like human psychology. We want to feel like we're doing it right to begin with,
yeah.
and Houdini is kind of telling us there are multiple right ways, and that can be very intimidating for somebody that's getting into it. So
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, possibly the actual question is like we discussed. You are to um, to create some kind of learning structured, I want to say, adventure, learning adventure. Is that a thing? Hopefully.
I guess, yeah,
Yeah,
let's make it a thing.
yeah. Me too. Like learning adventure, whichever it is. It's just it might sound like I'm repeating, I'm just being a jerk, but or I'm trying to sell you stuff, right? Which I'm not, but it really is the missing tutorial or the missing course that I really wished there was when I was starting. You know, everyone and their
Right.
mother says it when they try to sell you how to approaching anatomy, the course that I, wanted to be when I was starting, blah blah blah. But really, for Houdini, it's the real deal. There is no such like introduction. Like, what are normals? Why tangents? Why right attributes? What the hell is attributes? What the hell is everything? You know, why there are
Right.
so many buttons, but no one uses any buttons? How does that even? It was the most amazing stuff. Like, there are I don't know 400 buttons on the shelf tools, 300. No one uses any of them. I'm like, what is happening, right? Why? How can I create my cloud that looks like a pony? Why can't I just do it pressing buttons? And they're like, oh, no, 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 you should write Vex. Just don't press buttons.
Well, there was somebody that I'm trying to remember who it was. It was on Vimeo. I remember seeing that there was like this. Let me see here. There was this guy on Vimeo that does tutorials, and he was actually he was trying to. I think it was Mark Albrecht, but I might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was trying to do is he was trying to create a tutorial for each node, and his plan was like one node at a time, and explain what every node in Houdini does and how you can use it. And I thought that was like an excellent approach. Unfortunately, I think he got into like three or four of them, and then I'm sure like life took over, and he just didn't really have enough time to do that. And I still wish that somebody would pick up where he left off and continue that, because I found that to be fascinating. It's like, yeah, like please tell me. Like I want somebody to kind of tell me, okay, this is what this node does, and this is how you use it, and this is why you would want to use it. More importantly. And by the same token, I really wish that there was the same thing for shelf tools. And this is another thing that I got into a bit of heat over at the SideFX forum. Um, when I was like, why isn't there? Why aren't there more tutorials that use the shelf tools? And everybody's like, why would you want to use the shelf tools? Don't you want to? You're never gonna learn unless unless you just kind of build everything from scratch. And I find that to be like a silly argument, because obviously SideFX created these shelf tools for a reason. They
Yeah.
wouldn't they wouldn't have created them if they didn't want people to use them. So the whole idea that like one of the first things that you should do when you launch Houdini is just get rid of the shelf tools because they're just taking up screen real estate. It just seems so odd. It's like they're there for a reason. Like, I mean, why shouldn't we use them? Why do we have to repeat the same exact node creation every time when we can just click on one of the shelf tools and have our dynamic networks already created for us, or have our particle networks already created for us? It doesn't make sense, this resistance to using the shelf tools. It's weird. It's really strange.
Yeah. Especially considering, like I said, there are like 300 of those. What's the point of having
Right.
them?
And they're really amazing. I mean, there's so much cool stuff that you can do with it, and it's um like I'm starting my own Houdini tutorial channel on YouTube, and that's one of the things that I want to discuss. Is like, hey, like, a Houdini doesn't have to be like this crazy difficult program to learn, and b, let me tell you about some of the things that nobody else is talking about. Because that's, to me, important. Like, if somebody, somebody, I've been wishing for somebody to do the type of tutorials that I would find to be very helpful, and nobody has done it. So I figured, well, then I'm gonna do it myself, because somebody has to.
Yeah. I totally support you on that one. By the way, well,
Well,
we'll
thank you.
gotta check out if we are to become what it's called. Rivals. Fight for the audience. Am I right? No, it's
I don't think so.
yeah,
Hopefully we'll build upon each other's kind of knowledge.
exactly. It's like the more you have, the better it is for community. The community will grow, which will help everyone there, everyone on there, not just some.
Yeah.
It's like yeah. When I was trying to learn how to shade, there was just one tutorial on how to do it, and it was using Arnold. I'm like, okay, this is funny. Anyway, yeah, it's like what I'm trying to say. Once more, I'll repeat it, but it is true. It's not hard. It's
Right.
tedious. It's tedious, sure. It's not hard, but no one explains you anything. That's the ridiculous part. So
Oh
hopefully,
yeah.
hopefully this will change over like starting next week with me and you
Yes.
getting into the
For sure. For
into the
sure.
picture.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's because as I said, somebody has to do it, and and I think it's I find right now at the moment the wave seems to be going in Houdini's favor. I'm hearing so many people talk about Houdini. This is one of the most exciting software packages out there right now, and
Oh yeah, for
there's a
sure.
lot of
Especially
there's,
especially considering how much they invest in the real time right now.
yeah. I mean, absolutely, and I think I think we're like at the verge of a real change, and it's exciting. I mean, we're really in the middle of it. It's I mean, I can see like almost on a daily basis, like people are changing the way they're doing, and as a filmmaker, I see what some of my peers are doing. I find it to be very very inspirational for me because the bar is just being raised constantly, and all of a sudden things that were used to be the sole domain of big movie studios, all of a sudden I'm seeing in this some of these Vimeo shorts, and it just blows my mind. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I can't believe that somebody did that, you know
Yeah,
um
I totally get it. Every time I see new Vimeo stuff like shorts that are VFX or whatnot, or just some procedural things converting into other things, I'm looking at these thinking, I want to do this. I want to do this. you
yeah,
know,
but as you pointed out, like, I mean, I think Houdini Indie right now it's $200 a year or something like that.
269 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's incredible. I mean, the fact that you can have this much power available to you for such a low cost, it's amazing.
Yeah, this it's just next level of I don't
Yeah,
know. Like when we say Autodesk, right? The only thing Autodesk has for me is some kind of stuff for $2,000 per year. I have to pay $200, $2,000 per year, adding
right,
on some kind of not even talking about their support on forums and whatever, which is non-existent. The people are waiting
right.
for replies there for 3 months, paying $2,000 for that, mind you. Whereas if you have even Indie or whichever license, even Apprentice, you will have a reply on forum within a couple of days for sure, and maybe even
Mhm.
some people that are interested in helping others because I don't know, maybe they have 5 minutes of free time. They can answer your questions on Discord.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But to me, like, to go further on the point of all this power, I mean, and cost, cost factor. I mean, take Cinema 4D. It's I think like Cinema 4D Studio is I think now it's like $3,700.
Yeah, something around
Um,
that. Adds there like $1,000 just for the add-ons like particle and fume.
well, but that's the thing. Like, you're spending 37, and then you're like, okay, cool. Like, what am I getting out of this? How's the system? And people are like, oh no, you don't really want to use the built-in particle system. You really should get X particles. And then you're like, okay. How about like the fluid systems? And it's like, well, no, like Cinema 4D doesn't really have a fluid system, so you
Another
really
five
need
hundred
to.
bucks, right?
Yeah, and
And
before you know it, you're like
exactly. What
what
about VDBs?
what
Oh,
exactly did I buy?
you gotta
You
buy
know?
Houdini for VDBs. Okay, I got your
Yeah,
point.
well, that's the other thing. Like even the rendering engine, it's like, okay, like is the render engine like good? And it's like, well, physical renderer in Cinema 4D is a biased rendering engine that does not leverage the GPU, and it's it's not the fastest one out there. So even for just rendering, you really need to invest in some third-party solution. And Houdini gives you all this and more right off the bat, for free, or for like $260 a year. I mean, it's amazing. It's really unbelievable.
That is true. Next question. I usually
Yes.
ask everyone about this, just so I could hear your take on this. What do you think about real time, especially considering like Louis Krull and his team are developing so many amazing things for the real time, especially like all the
Right.
baking stuff, all the exporting stuff. Like yeah. Also, you have to keep in mind the latest video cards like RTX, which I gotta see
Correct.
to believe it. But
Right.
of course, all of us have seen the Atom, Book of what is it? Book of Silence. Was it Book of Silence or Forest of Silence that was created with using the Unity, the team from Atom.
Right.
So, and of course, Houdini guys are investing in all the game engine stuff, all this. I think that will be basically they will dominate all the gaming stuff, because there is no point in creating like in sculpting stones using 3D codes, or I don't know which have you, because you can generate those in Houdini, thousands of those. Also UV, auto unwrap, everything automatically. So what I'm trying to ask actually, like, where do you see the real-time filmmaking go? Because you are a filmmaker. What do you think about that?
Right. I think that's what's coming next. I mean, I'm very excited um, about the possibility, and I mean, once again, I was saying like how I feel like we're like in the middle of this revolution and this kind of big change, and that's part of it for sure. I mean, even seeing some of um, I saw some video based on Blender's Eevee engine, which is really really exciting to me, and basically you have real time rendering performance, which is just stunning, amazing, right inside Blender. So now all of a sudden you're literally able to move the camera about. Maybe you connect like like PlayStation controller to your computer, and you just kind of float through your scene, and that's your final render right there. Um, I mean, that blows my mind. And some time ago, I saw this really interesting demonstration where somebody was shooting. The way it worked, if I remember correctly, is that like they were at a soundstage and they had built this massive LED walls around this very simple set, and they had connected a 3D sensor, like like a gyroscope, to the camera. So when you filmed your actors, as you moved the camera around and you zoomed, you did all this kind of handheld motion, the background was being rendered in real time, and it would react. It would change and shift perspective so that it matched the movement of the camera, so you had like the correct parallax, and you had all this kind of correct movement to it. And it just blew my mind, and I was like, this is it. This is this is what's next. And it's exciting. I mean, it's only going to get better, more powerful. The new Nvidia cards, I hope that they're cracked up to be. I think this is like a great time to be in this field for sure.
That is true.
Amazing.
Because like even previously, to have a conversation like this, I
Yeah.
don't know, even 15 years ago, at least we had to set up some kind of TeamSpeak server or something. That was, yeah, at least that.
Yeah.
And there will be for sure no video streaming. There will be no YouTube, no nothing. It will be super hard even to connect with each other. And right now, you can send terabytes of data over the cloud, and like, It's okay. It's fine. Speaking of real time, like
Yes.
um if the octane guys are claiming are not bogus or just
Right.
right out not correct. So basically, the new video cards from Nvidia will have the new ray trace cores, which are like ASIC for ray tracing, and they will shoot 5 to 8 times faster um, rays into the scene.
Correct.
So basically, what we're having, like, of course, rendering is computing shaders and ray tracing, which is okay. Depends on how complex your shaders are, but even then, what I'm trying to say is like, if the GPU power rises the same speed as it was rising for the past 10 years or so, it will be okay to have a production machine with 300 teraflops in 2022-23, because I have seen a production machine that resolves a 4K within Octane using 7 GTX 1080 Ti's, which was a couple of seconds.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
like 5 years from now, using the same machine, I mean, $10,000 is an okay price for a production machine, right? It's not a Hollywood blockbuster, but still, it will be super fast, and it will pack so much punch. It will resolve the same picture, but 10 times faster. It will be like half a second, which is almost real time for me. If you ask me, like half a second is real time, all right.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean it's gonna be pretty amazing. I think that I mean, like we're not there yet. I think it's coming, and it's gonna happen a lot faster than we realize. And I think like this new, the new GPUs are gonna help tremendously. And I think that the technology is gonna get better as far as how to leverage, all of that power. And I mean, I would say, give it another 2 or 3 years, and we're going to be there. We're going to be at the point where rendering as we know it is going to be a thing of the past. You know,
I hope so.
so it's cool. It's going to be really cool, and we're going to see some stuff. And you know, I can't wait. I mean, to me, the stuff can't happen fast enough, and I think we're all very excited about it, and we're all very eager for it to happen right now. And what I'm seeing right now at the moment is that there's a little bit of misinformation. There's a little bit of kind of hype about what this new generation of NVIDIA cards is going to bring to the table, and I think people need to uh, kind of have like a little bit more realistic expectations, and this, and realize that this is a step in the right direction. But I don't think we're gonna get there yet in this generation of
Yeah,
GPUs.
for sure. It will take at least a year to write the code for the new RT cores in the first place, like from, I don't know, Redshift, right? They're saying there will be more power, but you have to write more codes optimized for more stuff there is.
For sure, for sure. But it's coming, and and as I said, it's gonna start happening a lot faster than even we realize. And I'm very excited about it. I can't wait.
Me too. Me too. Can I agree? Well, I think that was pretty much all I wanted to talk in this session with you, because I don't want to. I mean, we could talk for a week straight, but
That's true.
I don't think people
We could do
will be
part
able
two.
to listen to it the whole week.
Right.
So, if you want to say something, just some closing thoughts, some ideas, suggestions, or maybe shameless self plug, you're welcome to do it.
Well, sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for having me. This has been really a lot of fun, and I hope that our throughout our chit chatter, there's been like something kind of cool and useful for your listeners. And as I said, probably by the time that this podcast comes out, my YouTube channel is going to be out, and the name that I've given it is Right Brained Tutorials, because I wanted to have the emphasis on this kind of tutorials that would be um, very useful for creative types and artists that are looking to dive into something like Houdini and and be creative right off the bat. And I'm gonna start making more and more of these, and we're gonna try to keep them like very short and to the point. And most importantly, I'm gonna try to make them for real world scenarios. So that's my plug. Right brained tutorials on YouTube.
Cool. We'll have a link to it for sure. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. That was a pleasure to talk with you. Hopefully,
Thank you.
there is a
Pleasure was mine.
possibility I'll have you possibly sometime later, maybe even this year. And
For
yeah,
sure. Love to.
it was great. And if anyone liked this, please like and subscribe. If not, well, do about your stuff, what you're used to. And see you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.